We just talked about the splash screen, and what a perfect time to bring in a new control that is very useful and will probably make your programs much more interesting in the future. And that is the timer. And the timer allows us to do something on a set interval of time without the user actually having to do anything. So it kind of feels like the computer's doing it for you, which is really nice. So for example, when my program runs and the splash screen is here, it's kind of silly that the user has to press a button to make that splash screen go away. So because we don't really have much to load just yet, let's add a timer and kind of pretend that it's loading. So over in your splash form, double click the timer to add it to your program, and you should see timer down there. So for timers, we typically name them TMR, short for timer. I did not name my menu strip because we don't really manipulate a menu strip. We don't really need to write any code for a menu strip ever. Timer we often do. We often do need to write code to reference this timer and change things about it. Okay, so you've added a timer to your program, and these are the timer properties. Not many to work with. So enabled. Is the timer running when you run your program? By default, no, it's not running. So you would have to turn that on in your program. I want this timer to run as soon as my program starts, so I'm going to set this to be true. And the other important one is the interval. So the interval is how often that timer ticks. So by default, it's set to 100 milliseconds, which is a tenth of a second. So that's a quick timer. That's like ticking like that. If you set it to 1,000, that is 1 second. So that's a much slower timer. Tick. I'm going to set it to 2,000 milliseconds, which is 2 seconds. Basically, I want my splash screen to show for 2 seconds, close itself, and then move on to the main program. So how do I do that? Well, you can add an event to your timer, and the only event you can have is the tick event. And this tick event occurs whenever the interval hits, whenever your timer ticks. You can also just double click the timer down here and be brought to your tick event. So in this method, what do I want to happen? Well, when my timer ticks, when 2 seconds passes, I want my loading screen, my splash screen, to close. So I'm going to use the exact same line of code to do that. So now, when my program runs, the timer starts, and because the timer is set to have an interval of 2 seconds, after 2 seconds has passed, the timer ticks, and this line of code fires. So let's take a look and see how this works. Timer starts, tick happens, and I'm off to my main screen. If you think that's too quick, you can, let's say 5 seconds. So I'm going to put that to 5,000. Timer starts, and 5 seconds passes, it ticks, and it closes the application for you. Now, just while we're here, I want to clean up my program a little bit here with some certain properties. So this splash screen, if I click on the window, I want it to be the same size as my Hello World program. And right now, the size of my Hello World is 821 by 590. So I'm going to make 821, 590. I'm going to make my splash screen the same size. And let's go like that. Some tools we've used before. Okay, so now my splash and my main form are the same size. Let's look at some other cool ones. We have talked about the start position. I'm going to change the start position of both of my forms to be the center of my screen. This one is already the center of the screen. So now when they run, it shows up in the center of my screen. And it's nice aligned. They're both the same size. It looks really good. And one other cool property that I'm going to change. Let's change the form border style. So I think by default it's fixed single. If you put none, that means, well, I'll show you what it means. Form border style none. It kind of gets rid of that outside edge. And it makes your program look a bit more modern and immersive. So notice I don't have that window trim on it, which is fine now because I can close my program with my menu strip. And the users also cannot resize my window and make everything look funky. So they can't change the size. It's fixed in the middle of my screen. I don't know. Looks nice. Looks a lot better than what it did.